Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining today's Atticus Advantage webinar, The Anxiety Killer, Master the #1 Strategy to Reduce Stress. Today's presentation is presented by attorney and practice advisor Steve Riley. Steve, this is a lot of information I know we need to cover, so I'm going to hand it right over to you. My name is Mike Wells, everybody. I'm the organizer in the background. So go ahead, Steve.
All right, Mike, thank you. So good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending where you're at. Welcome to today's Atticus Growth Essentials webinar. Today's about a topic that is one that is really critical for where all of us are at during this pandemic cycle. And before I get too deep into it, some of you are new to Atticus, so I just want to introduce who we are and what we do so you have some context of why we're talking about this and what this conversation's about. So Atticus, we're really a coaching and consulting company. We help great lawyers build great law practices. And how we do that is a variety of different ways. Predominantly, we work with solo and small firm attorneys, typically managing partners and leadership teams inside of law firms. In some legal associations, we have a legal alliance with the Ohio Bar Association, the Illinois Bar Association, and we really work with lawyers from the moment they start their practice, like they became a solo practitioner, to the moment they sell it. So it's really from cradle to grave, more or less. Now, as we work with lawyers, we deliver our support a variety of different ways. Webinars such as this, workshops, and the workshops are one-day workshops, virtual workshops, coaching programs that are the Practice Growth Program and Dominate Your Market. Some of the hiring services we do are called My Great Team, where we help you find great paralegals, associates, new lawyers or staff for your team. And we also provide a lot of knowledge products, books. Some of our books are bestsellers in the legal industry on time management, marketing, and of course, hiring and managing. And really what we look at is, why do most lawyers want our help? Why do they want our support? Most lawyers want to have better autonomy, more control over their time, better clients, better cash flow, better income, greater staff, and really at the end of the day, probably increased income for better quality of life. Now, one of the things that we've really learned over the years is to help lawyers do this, we have to teach them a couple of distinctions. I'm just going to spend a minute to talk about one distinction now, so the rest of the webinar will make sense. To grow your practice, all of your thinking is based on your legal skills. And I want to emphasize the one word, skill, and that's how you do things. But to actually grow it, your legal skills only take you so far. What you have to work on are your business skills next. And to really move a practice gross revenue-wise, net revenue-wise, to reduce your stress and take more time off, you have to improve your time management and focus skills. You have to improve your client development skills, which is bringing in better clients, better dollar cases, building a great team, which are the people that really make your law firm work and take great care of your clients, and improve your cash flow and profitability. Now, we have to think about this as a business skills set. This is not your legal skills. You can draft a complaint better, you may be arguing from a jury better, but at the end of the day, your business skills are what makes your business work. And as lawyers, we're usually blind to that. So a lot of these Atticus Growth Essentials webinars are really about business skills. You can get terrific CLE, you can get free CLE pretty much anywhere. But to really get good business skills and think about how do you grow your practice, how do you move your practice forward is different. And today is really about that. And I'm really going to spend some time talking about anxiety and how to manage anxiety as a leader and thinker inside your law practice. Now, if you're able to do this, take pen and paper out, take notes. The session's interactive, so you can unmute and ask questions if you want. Mike is going to manage the chat box, so he'll interrupt me if he sees a question that he thinks I need to answer or respond to. And then at the end, hopefully we'll have some time to have any questions that you have answered or have any other discussion you want to have. My goal today is really twofold. One, if I can achieve this, I will be a happy man today. I want you to have a breakthrough in how you view, think about, and manage anxiety for you and those you care about. And two, towards the end, I'll talk about some ways that we might be able to help you in the growth of your practice. But today is really about anxiety. And why do I want to talk about anxiety? Why do I care about anxiety? Well, there's a major difference between anxiety and fear, anxiety and stress. And anxiety is really your body's way or your brain's way of looking for threats. And the problem with anxiety, especially today, is it completely wears you out. You can tell people, you can tell the symptoms of anxiety when you're dealing with restlessness. You feel tense all the time. You have sometimes panic attacks. You might be a little bit irritable. You're having difficulty sleeping. And worse, especially for lawyers, is poor concentration. At the end of the day, clients are paying you for your judgment. They're paying for your ability to think. They're paying you for your ability to think through problems, work through problems, and it's really your judgment to solve problems that they want your help on. So what chronic anxiety does over time, though, is worse. It starts to impair your judgment, which is the exact thing that we want to protect. 2, it starts to cause problems hormonally within your body. 3, it starts to mess with your thinking. You start to become judgment fatigued. You start to become even more anxious. You start to develop a really poor attitude, maybe a fatalistic attitude, and the quality of your life goes down and actually starts to cause some chronic health issues for a lot of people. And the worst thing that we're seeing right now is a lot of lawyers are just complaining about how exhausted they feel, how worn out they feel. And they feel that way because they have such a high level of anxiety. So what I want you to do is just talk about, play along with me for a moment. Let's do that. So prior to the COVID-19 shutdown, no matter where you're at in the US or Canada, I want you to score what you think your stress level was or your anxiety level was prior to the shutdown. So this is really important. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being super high, 1 being really low, go ahead and score. Just write it down, circle it on a piece of paper, and see what your anxiety level was before COVID-19. Now, my theory is for a lot of you, your anxiety levels and stress level were pretty high. And then what happened is we had COVID-19. And that was something that no one expected. Then you had to go virtual and start working from home and take your team and figure out how you're going to survive as a law firm and work from home. Then you have what I call the media panic palooza. You can't turn on the news. You can't operate your cell phone without some form of alert, really giving you the next piece of bad news. And then on top of that, you have cash flow concerns. Like, okay, how long will this shutdown last? How long will I be forced to operate virtually? How will I make this work? How will I make payroll? How will I do all the things I need to do? And then to add more fun to it, if you're a litigator, the courts are closed, or in some cases at least restricted. Here in Florida, you can't have a civil jury trial or a criminal jury trial or any form of public type of proceeding like grand jury proceedings until after July 2nd. And then after that, you have the pressure of client expectations. Some of you still have client expectations, even though you're operating virtually. And when you think about all this, if you've got your team operating virtually and they got little ones at home, now they're also playing the role of caretaker to their kids, caretaker sometimes to their adult parents, teacher, and full-time law firm worker. So anxiety has just been rampant over the past 2 months, and we're just now starting to get used to it. We're just now kind of processing all this anxiety. And if you don't consciously understand what you are doing is kind of boiling yourself with anxiety, you start to get incredibly exhausted, cranky, worn out, and you start to make bad decisions. So for a lot of the lawyers that are leading teams, anxiety is a big issue for us. We're trying to help them understand and be consciously aware that the reason that they're having some issues is because they're incredibly anxious. So I put together today's presentation to talk about 3 ways to deal with anxiety. I'm going to talk about 2 strategies, or I should say 2 practices, and then spend a lot of time just focused on one, and the one that I think can make the biggest difference for you immediately. So there's really 3 ways to deal with anxiety. The first one is to understand the distinction between anxiety, and fear. Now, inside your brain, you have your amygdala, and your amygdala is designed to keep you alive. It's your fight or flight component of your brain, and all it's doing constantly is scanning everywhere looking for dangers. The front part of your brain is your prefrontal cortex, and your prefrontal cortex is where your critical thinking resides and your judgment resides. Your amygdala is not a high logic creature. It is an emotional creature, and its only purpose is to keep you alive. Your amygdala is always scanning for dangers. However, your prefrontal cortex is a problem-solving component of your brain. So if you think you're having anxiety or trying to figure out why you're anxious all the time, one of the most important strategies, first and foremost, is to name the fear, to tame the fear. Interestingly enough, if you write about it and speak about it, the fear becomes a problem, moves from the back of your brain to the front of your brain, and your prefrontal cortex starts to engage how to solve that problem. So strategy one is really to name it, to tame it. So if you have anxiety, start to think about, what am I actually anxious about? Write it down or talk to someone about it, and then prioritize really what are the biggest things that I'm worried about. And what that does is shift it from your amygdala to your prefrontal cortex, and will actually reduce the anxiety and stress that you're feeling around it, because now the brain knows what the problem is and how to solve it. Strategy two, and this is something that I've been talking about constantly for 2 months straight, and almost every single lawyer and legal professional we're talking to has fundamentally ignored this advice. So you're more than welcome to do it, to try it and see if it works, but generally speaking, everyone's ignoring it. And the issue here is very simple. You must take quality time off, not poor time off, but quality time off. And when you take quality time off, it gives you a chance for your anxiety to decrease, your brain to start to recover, and for you to improve your judgment and critical thinking skills because you're not working. The key thing here is not to work, and that includes checking email. Once you check email, you've now re-engaged your brain from a problem-solving perspective. Now you've heightened your anxiety, and now you go back to the mode that you're in prior to taking the time off. So one of the second strategy I'm strongly recommending is to take time off, quality time off, 24 hours, no email, no legal work, no nothing. And just find something that you enjoy doing and do it. Even though you're at home, I don't care whether it's watching movies, I don't care what it is, but do something that allows you to recover and rejuvenate. Now, strategy three, which is probably the #1 strategy that I recommend, is so simple, so elegant, it doesn't cost you anything, but everyone will ignore it. And this is really expressing and developing and cultivating gratitude in your life. So I want to talk about this. Anxiety ultimately is a black hole. And when you think about it, once you get into a state of anxiety, it's like a black hole. It just sucks everything down the drain, and you just get into this cycle of anxiousness, anxiousness, anxiousness. Now, your brain loves anxiety. Why? Well, your brain is designed to do only one thing, and that's to keep you alive. Your brain doesn't care if you're happy. Your brain doesn't care if you're joyful. Your brain doesn't care about anything other than it's trying to keep you alive. So it's always about survival and threat, survival and threat. And that's what your brain's constantly looking for. That's what your amygdala is looking for. So when you think about this, while you appreciate that gratitude could be a fantastic strategy in a way of minimizing or reducing your anxiety, is not how your brain's wired. So you always have this interesting battle between anxiety and gratitude if you choose gratitude in your brain. So let's just talk about it for a minute. If your brain's wired for anxiety to keep you alive, brain doesn't care if you're happy one way or the other. Your brain uses fuel constantly to keep looking for threats, and your amygdala is constantly scanning for any type of threat that there could be on the horizon. And consequently, because your brain's using time and energy to do this, you're going to feel exhausted. So the more that you feel anxiety, the more your amygdala is heightened, the more you're looking for threats or risks. And it can be an unconscious experience. This is why so many people are walking around going, oh wow, I just feel stressed out all the time. I just feel really anxious. And you ask them why, they're like, I don't know. I just am. And if you don't capture this and understand that you can take anxiety and put it in a cage, or at least manage it, it can totally exhaust you and wear you out. Now, here's the difference though. Gratitude is different. Gratitude, your brain's not wired for gratitude. You have to consciously, as an adult, strategically choose gratitude as a practice in your life. So it's something that you proactively have to do, whereas anxiety is reactive. Two, you have to earn it. You just don't get gratitude reactively. You have to earn it. So you have to develop conscious habits and develop weekly, daily, and sometimes hourly practices. I like to compare it to working out. You have to work out to improve your physical fitness. And the same thing with gratitude. You actually have to work out your gratitude muscles. Otherwise, inertia will default you to anxiety because your brain doesn't care about happiness. It just cares about you being alive. And consequently, gratitude will show in the scientific studies, and I'll talk about a few of those in a minute, will give you a higher quality of life. It will make you happier. So when you think about this and you compare the two, your brain defaults to anxiety, doesn't care if you're happy. Your amygdala is scanning for dangers. It's a reactive, inert process, whereas gratitude requires work, and you have to develop it and you have to make it part of your life. You must earn it by cultivating habits, and you must engage the prefrontal cortex and develop ways of keeping gratitude to the forefront. And it's proactive, and change is hard, especially when you feel stressed out. Even when you know it's a good change, even when it's good for you, it's difficult to do. So when we look at these things, you're trying to balance anxiety versus gratitude. Anxiety is how your computer defaults in your brain. It's just basically how it works. And the amygdala works like a scanning software behind the scenes, constantly looking for threats, kind of like a virus software. Whereas gratitude requires conscious work. So the question I always ask, or I have lawyers ask me, is it worth the work? Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Is it really worth it? So I actually did some research on this, and I've gotten studies for you. I got a scientific study for you. And so we found a scientific study called Counting Your Blessings versus Burdens, an experimental investigation of gratitude in subjective well-being in daily life, from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. And I've uploaded this for you, so if you want to download the article and read it afterwards, by all means. But this scientists did a study on gratitude, and they found 3 insights. One, the group that practiced daily gratitude habits had better well-being. They were more optimistic, spent more time exercising, and complained about physical ailments less. That was an interesting insight. Insight number 2, the gratitude group had higher life satisfaction. They were more optimistic. They had a more positive effect and were likely to have helped someone in some way, shape, or form. So they were looking for ways of contributing and helping people. Now, interestingly, they didn't have any more improvements. They didn't get skinnier. They didn't get fatter. They didn't change anything in their physical health. Their heart rate didn't change, nothing changed there, but they were looking for helping people and have more positive attitude about life. And 3, the insight 3, which was really interesting, they had greater life satisfaction. They were more optimistic about the next week. They had more social connections with other people. They reported better quality of sleep, had more hours of sleep, report more negative effects in their life, less complaints, and at the end of the day, had no real change in their physical health. They just felt better and were happier. So after studying this, the profound scientific conclusion of this was people who practiced and engaged in a gratitude practice daily were typically contributing more to others and were happier in their day-to-day life. They had no evidence of more money, no evidence of more success, no more anything. They weren't skinnier, fatter. They were just happier and had a more positive outlook on life. So when you think about this, it's kind of interesting for me. When they think about this, they were just happier, and all they did was one thing. And the scientific conclusion was to do this, they had a daily gratitude practice. And they discovered that they looked at whether it's better to do it weekly or daily, and they found that a daily gratitude practice of some form actually had a greater impact than a weekly one. So instead of waiting to the end of the week and saying, well, I'm grateful for this or grateful for that, they said if you actually did it daily, it had a greater impact. So I guess it's like exercise. If you have a daily exercise commitment, it's going to have a greater impact than a weekly commitment. And it starts to compound over time, like interest. Like I guess it's like compounding interest. So the second piece of research I have for you is very interesting. And you can download this as well. I've uploaded it into the chat box. And this is called The Business Case for Gratitude. Interesting article in the Wall Street Journal from November of 2018. Yep, I've kept this article for years. And it talked about the Plymouth Colony in the business case of gratitude. It's a very interesting article because the author, Sam Walker, basically went back and researched gratitude and how gratitude had impacts in different businesses. And he basically talked about how Liam Bradford, the governor of Plymouth Colony, was dealing with poor morale, dealing with just coming off of a plague, coming off of a drought, and people were, struggling for food. And he instituted a gratitude meeting, which we now got institutionalized by George Washington, Abraham Lincoln as a national practice called Thanksgiving. And what Sam Walker studied in this article was that the more that businesses adopted gratitude, more that businesses integrated gratitude, the happier their team members were. So this is a very interesting article for those of you like, well, I don't really care about happiness. I really don't care about gratitude. I really don't care about joy. What I care about productivity of my team. I would encourage you to read this article. Sam Walker also wrote a very interesting book, so I would encourage you to check that out and see what you think. And then my last resource for you on this is a fabulous book called The Happiness Advantage. And The Happiness Advantage is by Shawn Achor. Shawn is was a researcher and lecturer at Harvard, and he was is part of the positive psychology movement. And the positive psychology movement is incredibly interesting because most of psychology and psychiatry today is about studying people that are dealing with some form of malady psychologically, and they have studied this for 100, 150 to 200 years. And about 20 to 30 years ago, a group of psychologists said, well, I got an idea. What if we study happy people, figure out why they're happy, get the traits of what happy people are doing, and take those practices and teach it to the people that are miserable. And so this whole field of positive psychology basically has bubbled up in the past 20 to 30 years. Shawn Achor is one of the more popular writers and thinkers in that particular field. And he wrote the book, Happiness Advantage. In the book, he studied what it took to be happy and how happiness was an advantage. And this is interesting to me because, as some of you know, I teach a lot of programs for Atticus. I influence a lot of curriculum for Atticus. And I used to assign this book, The Happiness Advantage, in our programs. And the feedback I got from lawyers was, hey, look, I understand that positive thinking stuff. I understand, all of that. And really what I want to do is make more money, and I want to work less. And, I'm okay not being happy doing that. So we actually had to take the book out of the curriculum because people weren't interested in being happy. They weren't interested in being joyful, which I found intriguing. And so Shawn, in his book, basically said consistently grateful people are more energetic, emotionally intelligent, forgiving, and less likely to be depressed, anxious, or lonely. Now, I want you to think about this from a business perspective, just for a moment. If you're looking to refer a legal case to someone, who do you want to refer it to? The most miserable, anxious, cranky person you know, or someone that you liked someone that you find energetic to be around, someone that you think is going to take great care of your client, someone that's going to be a good person, and someone that's going to make a difference for them. And this, to me, is why The Happiness Advantage was such a profoundly interesting book, is because so many lawyers are so busy working that they've forgotten to take time to be happy. They've forgotten time to take, to find joy in life. They've forgotten a lot of things, and they've kind of got to what I call a used to life. They used to be happy, they used to be doing good things, and now they just work. So you take these really hardworking, overachieving people who are incredibly intelligent, and we strip the joy and happiness out of them at law school to teach them to be hard workers. And then most of them go for 10 to 20 years, probably close to burnout. And that's when they reach out to a company like ours and say, I'm pretty miserable. I've achieved all my goals. I've achieved everything I wanted, but at the end of the day, I'm not happy. I go home, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I can't sleep. All I think about is this and that and the other thing, and I don't know what to do. I think at the end of the day, happiness is a learned skill. And that's why I recommend this book. That's why I recommend gratitude as a practice. So when I kind of go through the scientific case for this, or the argument for this, I'm not trying to persuade you to be happy. I'm trying to persuade you to be open to the possibility of not being miserable at this point in time. So let's move on, because one of the common questions I get is, Steve, if I do this, will I be able to eliminate anxiety altogether? No, you won't. You won't. Why? Well, let's talk about that for a moment. Your brain is already structured to keep you alive, and that's what your brain's structured to do. You can't change the hardwiring. You can cultivate happiness habits. You can cultivate gratitude practices. You can cultivate all kinds of things to make yourself more joyful and happy. But if we don't keep those practices up, your brain's going to default to survival, and it's going to default to anxiety. So at the end of the day, your brain's always going to be about survival. So if we don't work and have you cultivate those practices, they're going to go away. I like to think of this this way. I grew up in a little beach town, and on the Atlantic Ocean, a little town called Daytona Beach. And I always like to think anxiety is like the ocean. If you turn your back on it, it's going to get you. And so one of the things you learned as a kid in the ocean, you never turned your back on the ocean because a wave's going to get you and wipe you out. Anxiety is kind of like that. You have to respect it. And you have to respect that you have to have certain practices to keep it at bay, because you're in a business, you're in an industry where stress is normal and high stress is normal. So learning how to manage your stress and manage your anxiety is actually a strategic advantage for you as a lawyer. It's a strategic advantage for you as a leader. It's a strategic advantage for you as a person, and it's a strategic advantage for your firm. So will you be able to eliminate anxiety altogether? No, you won't. You won't. These require cultivated practices over time where you earn gratitude and you earn happiness. If you turn your back on anxiety, it's going to catch up with you. Two, the next point I'd like to make is, what if I become too grateful? Will I lose my edge? I've actually had somebody ask me this: if I become too grateful, will I lose my edge? I want to keep that edge as a litigator. No, you won't. You won't. I mean, the skills that you have as a good lawyer are going to be there with you as a good lawyer no matter what. You're a good lawyer, if not a great lawyer. And you're just going to be a more humble, happier, contributing human being as a lawyer, and you'll never lose your edge. You may find a different approach on certain cases. You may find a different approach with certain lawyers. You may find a different approach with your team, your spouse, your family, but you're never going to lose your edge as a lawyer. You're a good lawyer. You wouldn't be on these webinars if you weren't, and you wouldn't be caring about your professional skills if you weren't here. You'll never lose your edge. So, but what you can do is actually find a greater sense of meaning in your practice, a greater sense of meaning in your life by these types of practices. So let me go ahead and shift gears, and I'd like to talk about how to develop gratitude practices in your life. So we've talked about the case for gratitude. We talked about what anxiety does. We realize that anxiety is the default and you have to work for gratitude. So how do you do it? How do you do it? How do you actually go and earn it? Well, let's talk about the basics. So basic number one is developing a daily gratitude practice. Now, most studies will show it takes about 30 days to build a habit, and sometimes longer, depending on what that habit is. And what I'm going to recommend to you, and this is something that we've recommended to a lot of our clients during the COVID-19 crisis to help them deal with anxiety, is that in your chat box, you can download this little PDF and it folds over. And in fact, here's mine. If you're following along, you can see me on the camera. Basically, you can fold it over and it can go into your pocket and goes about anywhere. I didn't fold mine over because it's next to my desk, but my wife takes hers and folds it over and takes it with her wherever she goes. But it's something that is designed to help you capture and write 10 gratitude statements during the day. Now, for me, I'm probably working my way up to somewhere between 15 to 20 because I'm really enjoying it. And I notice that each time I write down something I'm grateful for, I take probably 10, 15 seconds and just meditate on it for a second. One of my things that's constantly making the list is having coffee with my wife every morning. It's probably my favorite thing of the day, and I really look forward to it. One of the things that make my list today is Mike, who helps me organize and do these webinars. He does a fantastic job. He does a beautiful job. He takes some of the ugly stuff I create on webinars and just makes them beautiful. One of the things I'm grateful for is you. We have 100+ lawyers here today, and they're listening to me to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, which is cultivating a gratitude habit. So there's wonderful things to find to be grateful for. You just need to find a way of developing a practice to look for them and finding out things that make you grateful. Now, my recommendation is that you do it during the day whenever it occurs and just write it down. It takes 10 seconds at the most, maybe 3 seconds. And then at the end of the day, you can review it. Now, the interesting thing, and we won't have a lot of time to talk about it today, but there's a big distinction in your brain between dopamine and serotonin. Dopamine is the thing that gets you going. It's the reason that you always check your phone, check your email. It stimulates your brain. Serotonin is a thing that allows you to calm down and start to relax and go to sleep at night. And it's a calming, peaceful chemical that washes over your brain. And these two things are flowing in and out of your brain at any given time. At night, when you start to go ahead and start to calm down and call it a day, reviewing your gratitude statements for the day is a great way of enhancing the serotonin and kind of chilling out and starting to relax and starting the wind down process for you. So the first recommendation that I have for you, if you are open to trying it and saying, okay, I think you have persuaded me, Steve, I'm willing to try it, is to develop a daily gratitude practice. Writing down at least 10 things a day that make you grateful, and it can be anything. It can be a beautiful sky. It can be having time to walk your dogs. It can be a great client conversation. It can be a new case, whatever it is that makes you grateful during the day. Can it be the same thing every day? Yeah, for me, as long as I feel grateful about it, I'm terrific rewriting, having coffee with my wife. It's fabulous for me. Now, I do want to say that I strongly recommend that you don't think about it, you actually write it down. Because when you write it down, it engages, once again, your prefrontal cortex and starts to develop kind of pathways in your brain and starts to engage a habit for you. And it starts to allow that grateful experience and grateful feeling to occur. Thinking about it versus writing it down is a much more different it's a different process for your brain and is a different process for you. So I'm going to strongly, strongly, strongly recommend that you actually take the time to write it. And I would go for 10 a day, at least 10 a day. 3 is pretty easy, but 10 starts to stretch it. And it takes maybe 10 minutes a day. So you're basically investing 10 minutes a day to develop a gratitude practice and feel happier and grateful. Now, my partner, Mark Powers, sent me this quote this morning because he knows I'm a nut about this. And I like this particular quote. And this is from a monk. And he said, and we actually have, in Atticus, we put together a bunch of bookmarkers, and we use this particular quote because it's a really cool quote. In daily life, we must see that it's not happiness that makes us grateful, but gratefulness that makes us happy. And I love this quote because gratefulness is the investment for happiness. And I like the way David states this, Brother David states this, and I think it's a really, really good way of thinking about it. So happiness is really the byproduct of gratefulness. And so gratefulness is what makes us happy, not happiness making us grateful. So I think it's a pretty insightful statement by him. So I'm just going to encourage you that if you're trying to look for ways of enhancing joy, enhancing happiness, is to start a gratitude practice. When should you start it? Now, now. In fact, we'll drive Mike crazy together. Why don't you just post something in the chat box that you're grateful for now? Just go ahead. There's 100+ of you. It'll drive Mike crazy. He'll yell at me later. It's okay. Just go ahead and put something in the chat box you're grateful for. Doesn't matter.
Never
no
yell.
one's going to call you and say, hey, are you really grateful for that? It doesn't matter.
I would never
really
yell.
Matters is the practice of you chatting something and saying something that you're actually grateful for. That's what matters. Now, while you do that, I'm going to talk about the second practice. And I like to call this the intermediate gratitude practice. So we already talked about the basics. And so to go to the next level of your gratitude practice, I'm going to presume are doing the basics, which is having a daily gratitude practice and writing, where you're writing it down, whether it's in a journal or our gratitude tool, it doesn't really matter. But the second level of this is the kind of the intermediate level, is to start a gratitude challenge cultivation group. Put together a group of people that are important to you, could be your family, could be your friends, could be anyone else like that, and start with them preparing a cultivation group where you're actually sharing with them things that you're grateful for. And the thought process behind this is that you're starting a group of people that are not only supporting you in your own accountability, being grateful, but it's interesting. So here's one of the interesting things I've learned about this. As you have a gratitude practice, you start to appreciate things. And when I say appreciate, I mean the word, two meanings of the words, that you appreciate it and it actually starts to rise in value to you. So, for example, for the past 2 months, I've written down how much I enjoy having coffee with my wife. And it has just risen in value to me to the point that I go to bed happy knowing that the next morning I'm going to have coffee with my wife. I know it sounds crazy, but I go to bed happy looking forward to that. Now, the people that I've written down on my list, everything from Mike to my amazing assistant Samantha, to my partner Mark, to some of the people I co-teach with, to some of my clients, their value to me, since I've been writing their names on my gratitude challenge worksheet, have actually appreciated it, have become more valuable to me. So it occurred to me that if I could get together a cultivation group of other people that are practicing gratitude, I may make their gratitude list and I may become more valuable to them. I may rise in the value of my appreciation to them. They may appreciate me more and my value may appreciate to them. So putting together a group, inviting a group to play together is a really interesting way of developing greater gratitude and joy in your life. And it's something that's contrary to how most people think and how most people act. So you want to go ahead and invite people to this, say what you're going to do. My partner Mark did this with Denise and Daniel, and is doing this with Denise and Daniel and our team, and they share their gratitude challenge every day. And Mark was sharing with me how much he enjoys it and how much he appreciates them for sharing it with them, and how much more he's learning about them. So you can do it with coworkers, you can do it with family, you can do it with extended family, you can do it with anyone that you want to increase their value to you, and you want them to increase, you want them to perceive an increase of value of you by them. So you want them to appreciate you and you appreciate them. So this is just a cultivation group. You can do it daily, which would be my recommendation where you're sharing this. It can be done simply, easily, multiple different ways. So that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to move to my third one, which is the third practice, which I think is very, very helpful and interesting as well. So this is where I'm going to assume you're doing the basics already. You're doing the basics where you're doing a gratitude practice. You've adopted the intermediate where you're doing a cultivation group where you're sharing and encouraging people to share that every day. The third level is completely different. The third level is going to actually write an expression of gratitude to someone. So you just every day, in addition to everything else that you're doing, is write an expression of gratitude to someone. I would recommend it that it be in handwriting, so like a note, a card, whatever. That seems to make a greater impact and makes a bigger difference. And who doesn't love to get a really nice note in the mail to acknowledge, be acknowledged. So the more advanced level is really sharing the love and sharing the gratitude in writing to someone. So I've talked about 3 different practices. The basic practice, which is handwriting, 10 gratitude statements a day. 2, the intermediate practice, which is cultivating a gratitude group. And the third practice, which is really expressing gratitude to someone every day that, something you appreciate about them. It could be something simple, could be complex, it's really up to you. What I'd like to do is kind of move to the next level of conversation here. So I'd like you to write down for me the 3 biggest takeaways, and just write it. Those of you that are following along, with those of you that are watching this later, just write down the 3 biggest takeaways. What are the 3 most important things that you learned today? You might be writing down that, I learned that my brain doesn't care if I'm happy. My brain just wants me alive. And my amygdala is scanning constantly for dangers. That's like I see them everywhere I turn. 2, it could be, I'm going to try this. I'm just going to try and develop a gratitude practice daily and see what happens. 3rd might be, it wouldn't hurt for me to appreciate and value to others. So it wouldn't hurt for me to try and put together a gratitude cultivation group and see what that looks like and see how that works for me. Now, my other request, as we're kind of going along with this, I'm going to request that you go ahead and put in the chat box, just go ahead and type it, what you think your biggest takeaway was for today. What do you think the biggest takeaway was out of today's presentation? And then I'm going to shift gears and talk for a few minutes about a couple other things. I'm going to talk in a few minutes about recommendations and next actions. Okay. So let's go to recommendations and next actions. So my recommendation and next action for you is really depending on where you're at right now. There's a lot of people on these webinars that enjoy getting our content, enjoy listening to what we talk about, enjoy some of the things that we're sharing. I know that today we had over 100 plus of you, and 98% of you have been engaged the entire time. Thank you for that. I'm going to encourage you to, take a risk and invest in maybe working with us as a company and seeing what we could do to help you. And the investment to that is 100% guaranteed. It's called a practice growth diagnostic. It's a $295 investment, and it's 100% guaranteed. We got our word on it. And how that works is you do a focused disc advantage, which is basically taking a disc profile test, probably one of the most insightful tests I've ever taken in my life. The great thing about the disc profile, it allows you to understand what your strengths are and build your firm around your strengths. Most of us grew up with the belief that the most intelligent thing to do is to be a well-rounded individual. And as I've gotten older, I realize that's a really dumb mistake. It would be kind of like telling Frank Sinatra that he needs to learn to play the guitar and not sing. It'd be like telling Pavarotti he needs to learn to play the guitar. Why would you do that? They're the greatest at what they do. If you're a great trial lawyer, you need to strengthen your firm around your trial ability and really make it so that you are on stage all the time performing as a trial lawyer. So if you have your DISC supports that, then you need to design your firm so you're doing what you're great at all the time, not the stuff that you hate and you're not good at. Two is get a good practice assessment. We really look at the solo and small firm foundations of growth. We look at your time management, your cash flow profitability, your client development, your ability to manage team. Those are the critical business skills. And where are you doing with that? How are you doing with that? And then the person that coaches you through that will give you their analysis. And at the end of that call, you'll really get the three most important or impactful actions that you think you need to take to move forward with your practice. It's easy to schedule. You just go to our website. Like I said, it's $295. You go to our website, Atticus Advantage, and it says Get Started in the upper left-hand corner, easy to find. Click that. And if you register today, Mike is giving you the $89 How Good Attorneys Become Great Rainmakers as part of that investment. So if you're thinking about this, you also get a $90 book as part of the investment, and it's 100% guaranteed. If you're like, okay, I'm ready to get going, I got to start thinking about my COVID-19 recovery process for my law firm. How am I going to get back on my feet? How am I going to get my team back in the office? How am I going to get everything going? I need some help. That's what we're here for. And if the investment's no good, we'll refund your money. If you say that was not a good investment of my time, we'll refund it. And last but not least, I'm going to recommend that you don't do the 90-day Think About It program.
Battery 90%.
Sorry, I have to turn the speaker on. It turned off when we were talking. Sorry about that. And so, the problem that a lot of people we're incredibly intellectual group, but thinking about is distinct from doing, and doing is where the learning's at. And I will encourage you as best you can to quit thinking, start acting, and start learning. Our upcoming webinar, I don't want to forget to talk about this, but our upcoming webinar is May 28th at 3 o'clock, and we're doing one called Leading Your Team Away from Distraction. And we have I'm bringing on a fabulous co-teacher, Bill McCarter, who is a team leader for a very large plaintiffs firm. And Bill is just done wonders with this firm. I think they have about 200 employees, and Bill has done a fantastic job keeping them productive and running them virtual. And Bill's going to come on and really learn and share with him from his viewpoint. He's not a lawyer, he's a business person, and he is a COO. And he's going to learn from his viewpoint as a professional manager, what are the 5 key things that he recommends that you do to keep your team focused and motivated and accountable while working remotely or transitioning home. The next thing I'm going to recommend is that you stay connected with us. Our YouTube channel,
Hey everyone, I've just messaged Steve. We lost his audio a few moments ago. So Steve, you want to check your connection on your audio settings?
Mike, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Mike.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, buddy. I guess when my speaker turned off, it turned off my microphone at the same time. So I don't know where you lost me. So I apologize that I'm trying to show the camera and the speaker turned off, and when I turned the speaker on, it turned off my microphone. So, oh well. It's the best this video crew can do right now, in the audio crew. So Mike, I'm just going to check in and see if there's any questions or thoughts or comments that people want to share in the last 10 minutes that we have, or last 5 minutes that we have.
Can you hear me okay, Steve?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. We have a couple of hands raised, and we've had a number of people type in their insights. I do want to point out a lot of people said they were grateful for Atticus, so thank you guys so much. Our mission at Atticus is to serve you to greater work-life balance, and we're always here for you. So thank you for saying that. Another one said they were thankful for a new puppy, so I don't have to say puppies rule. But we have a
Puppies
couple of
too.
we have a couple of hands raised, and so I'm going to call on you, and I'm going to unmute you. The first is Robert Foster. So, Robert, I'm unmuting you now. If you had a comment or a question, you could speak up.
Hey, Robert.
Okay, Robert may have audio issues himself. So, the next one is Amy Shield. Amy, if you're listening, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, I was just typing in and raised my hand just to say we lost you when you were talking about leading your team away from distraction, your May 28th webinar. And then after that, you went blank. So if there's anything you wanted to inform us about right after that point, please feel free to do so, because this has been a most enlightening webinar.
Thank you. Thank you. What I was saying, and apparently I lost you then, is I'm having a COO of a very large firm, Bill McArthur, join me on that call, and Bill's going to talk about 5 strategies. He's a professional manager. The law firm stole him away from a large hospital as an operations person, and we're going to talk about the 5 strategies he sees from a medium to large firm perspective and how they can be applicable to small firms. So I appreciate you asking that question. And I'll talk about some of the things I'm seeing helping our clients, since we're working about 500 law firms right now, stay focused, helping our law firms keeping their teams focused during this time period. So thanks for asking that.
I do want to say, Steve, I think where we lost you is where you were talking about our social media channels. And I put those in the chat box for everybody, so the links are there for you. So if you're not already following Atticus on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or our YouTube channel where you can subscribe, the links are in the chat box. All of the handouts that Steve's discussed today are also in the dashboard. And thank you so much, Steve. We don't have any other questions that have come in, but this has been a great information for a lot of people. The comments that are coming in is how this has really affected them.
Good, thank you, Mike. So thanks, everyone. I just want to thank you for joining us. I would encourage you to at least subscribe to the YouTube channel. I am always amazed at the amount of content and stuff that our coaches and our team put up there. So if you're looking for some, support in your practice, you may not be quite ready to work with us. It's a great place to get good content consistently. Everything from our weekly Busy Lawyers Brief to webinars like this to some of the Practice Growth series and some of the other COVID-19 webinars have been posted up there. Mike and his team have done a great job of keeping great content up there. So it's a great place of getting resources and support during this time period. And with that, everyone stay safe, take care, and I'm grateful for you, and thanks for spending the time with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.